Hello, beautiful people. Welcome back to another episode of Work the Crowd podcast. I am one of your hosts, Dougie Fresh, and also with me here today, and as always, Jacob Klucas.
You almost had a Jim Nance starting there.
I tried. That's a hilarious because I tried to do that.
Hello, friends. Jim Nance here.
I tried to go with that. That's funny. Anyways, not Jim Nance. Obviously, his voice is way more awesome than mine. But this episode is going to be a good one, I think. It's pretty much just going to be an NFL draft review. Mr. Klucas has his breakdown of what he likes. I think he's going to do top 5 teams he liked in the draft and the top 5 he didn't. And then, obviously, we're going to talk about the Shedeur Sanders downfall. Holy Jesus. Yeah. I don't think I've seen anything like it, or it's been a long time since I have.
So we're going to obviously talk about that, but let's start off with a theory here that's been thrown around on Twitter now. And let's start with your opinion on this, all right? So this is the theory now. The theory is that once he slid past the first round, okay, that it was a Roger Goodell decision to tell teams not to draft Shedeur until Saturday in attempt to keep eyes on the NFL draft all the way through.
Ooh, I think that's not right. I don't think that's what happened, but I mean, it worked. Everybody tuned into every day of the draft, I bet, until Saturday.
You got to think he went round 5. I mean, realistically, no disrespect to the players that went 6 through 7. I mean, unless you're Tom Brady or Brock Purdy, who went 6th and 7th round. I mean, more likely than not, you're not going to make the final cut. So it's kind of like, okay, cool, make it last till round 5 and we can make things happen. But I mean, you kept them through round 5. That kept you through about half the day on Saturday. And yeah, I mean, it just kept eyes on the screen of the NFL draft just to see where Shedeur's going.
I mean, it's a good theory. It's a good conspiracy.
Again, I'm with you. I don't think that's correct, but at the same time, it's not out of the realm of possibility.
I would love to see the numbers of viewership from last year's draft to this year's draft and for rounds.
So I know
3 through 5.
Not viewership. I'll look that up here in a second, but attendance in total for the 3 days was 600,000, which was tied for the most with Pittsburgh back in 2018, I think they said. Maybe I'm wrong on that.
Wow.
But it was tied for the most in attendance.
It was in
Green Bay.
Green Bay, right? Them Packer fans, they show out. So
well, there ain't nothing else to do in Green Bay. So
make cheese. I think they make cheese there.
But yeah, I mean, let's talk about it. I mean, Shedeur Sanders fell to the 5th round from a person that, I mean, at one point we were talking about as the number 1 pick with Cam Ward. It just all depended on which one between the two the Titans liked. So we're talking about, but from once the draft went on, we all knew Cam Ward was going number 1 overall once we started diving into it. So realistically, we're talking number 2 pick in the draft, falling all the way to the 5th round. And it's got to be, and me and my uncle were talking about this all weekend because we were kind of just on the Shedeur watch, especially with him being a Browns fan. He's been, Shedeur's been tied to the Browns this whole time, But this has to be one of the biggest downfalls, one of the biggest draft slides in history, if not the biggest slide.
I'm gonna say it was
because I mean we've seen guys like. Yeah, we've seen guys like, a couple years ago. Malik Willis was a projected 1st round pick. He fell to the 2nd round. Will Levis was a projected 1st round pick. He fell to the 2nd round. So there's been slides, but not as monumental as that. Going from 1st to 2nd isn't as big of a deal in comparison to 1st to 5th. So, well, let's talk about it because everybody has an opinion, obviously, on this. And the number 1 thing that I saw on X all weekend has been, well, he fell because he's black. And folks, the number 1 pick in the draft, who was a quarterback, is African American. So what are we doing here? It had nothing to do with that. All right. So let's start there. Had nothing to do with that. All right. We got into people hate seeing young, confident. Again, it has nothing to do with he's black. Then we get into, all right, based off his interviews and everything, which we'll dive into as well, but he came off as too cocky, too arrogant. And this was in terms of teams deemed him too cocky and too arrogant. And he was his arrogance and talents level, arrogance was up here, talent level down here. And They were like, his arrogance doesn't match his talent level, and which we can agree with, because let's be real, in last year's draft, because the last year's draft was a huge quarterback class. Even Cam Ward, who went number 1, he's not going above Caleb. He's not going above Jaden. He's not going above Drake May. I don't think he's going above Bo Nix. I think the conversation for Cam in last year's class would have came somewhere in between Penix and JJ McCarthy. So that's that. And so now we're talking about, if Shedeur's in that class, we're talking about him going after JJ McCarthy, probably. All right. So this wasn't the only reason Shedeur was highly touted as a quarterback in this class is because there's not a whole lot of good quarterbacks in comparison to past drafts. I still think that this quarterback class is better than people give credit for, but it's not as good from a star aspect. All right. So Shedeur, let's be real. The only reason he is as polarizing and highly talked about and everything as he is because he's Deion's kid. All right. If we take the Sanders name off the back of him, and he's not tied to Deion at all, Colorado, anything, and he puts up the numbers that he does, we're not talking about this guy as a top 3 pick. Somebody like that does fall to the 5th round, we wouldn't have been shocked about. If I cleared his name and you did not know who Shedeur Sanders was, and I showed you his numbers in college and his accolades, and I told you he went 5th round in the NFL draft, you'd probably go, that's about right. Maybe a little earlier just for, teams need a quarterback, want to take a chance, anything like that. But you'd probably say that's about right. And so that's what I need people to understand. It's Shedeur, when you interview as horribly as Shedeur did, allegedly, okay? Now, obviously, I wasn't in on these interviews. I can't tell you exactly what he said. But when the rumors of him interviewing terribly come out, and it's not just one coach, one GM saying it, it's multiple people saying it. When you interview terribly, you're not that talented, okay? And you have to play into a fact that your dad is going to have a say-so behind closed doors, behind our backs, and just to you. Yeah, why would I want to draft him? Why do I want to deal with that headache? And the number one show for that was the Pro Day, Colorado's Pro Day. I don't know if you saw this clip or not, Doug. There was a clip where they were lining up to do drills at the Pro Day. And one of the scouts, assistant coaches, whatever that were there, were trying to line guys up to run the drill. Deion stepped in and said, no, y'all know what to do. Fuck that. Don't listen to him. So now if I'm a GM and I'm taking my chance at Shedeur and I'm going to go, well, more than likely Shedeur is going to be going and telling his dad what goes on here. And I'm now behind closed doors. I'm going to have Deion telling Shedeur, fuck that, do this because I think I know more. Yeah, I don't want to deal with that either. So I could see why he slid. Now, and here's my thing with the quarterbacks that were taken in front of him. So you had obviously Cam Ward went number 1 overall. Then you had Tyler Shuck in the 2nd round, Jalen Milroe in the 3rd round, I believe.
Jackson Dart in the 2nd round.
Yeah, Jackson Dart in the 1st round. Sorry.
First round. Yeah.
Ward, Dart in the 1st round, Tyler Shuck in the 2nd round, Milroe and Gabriel in the 3rd round. So here's the thing about the guys in front of them. Ward, everybody but Gabriel. If you came to me and said, we drafted in front of Shedeur, I can somewhat understand because 1, Cam Ward was obviously better. But 2, with Dart, Milroe, Shuck, I have higher upside than Shedeur does. Their floor may be lower than Shedeur, but at their upside and potential, I think can be better than what Shedeur's upside and potential can be. So if I can take that and not have to deal with, all the extra stuff, the interviews and Deion and everything, yeah, I'm going to take my shot at that. Especially somebody like Seattle who took Jalen Milroe. They're taking him as a project. They just signed Sam Darnold, and Sam Darnold is still relatively young. So there's no pressure to play Jalen Milroe right away at all. All right. There's no pressure to play him really at all. If Jalen Milroe didn't take a snap in the NFL, there's no pressure on it. That's, so when you cannot deal with the extra stuff and get higher upside, then you're gonna take that. And that's the other thing with Shedeur. Besides Cam Ward, I can argue Shedeur's the most NFL-ready quarterback prospect of this class behind Cam Ward. Like if I were to roll out the rookies and say we're going to play day 1, who's going to play the best, Shedeur would probably be up there number 2 or potentially number 1, even in front of Cam Ward. So if I'm the Giants and I trade back up, I have no intentions of wanting to play whatever quarterback I draft right away. Same with, the Seahawks. Now, if I draft him, now I got to listen to not only the media, but Deion trash my team about not playing him and playing other people in front of him. So, 1, if the Browns don't play him, there's a couple reasons behind that. One, they're the Browns. They're notorious for making bad mistakes, so it doesn't matter. The Seahawks, they just signed Sam Darnold. There's no need to play Shedeur right away. New Orleans now could have been different because with the whole Derek Carr injury, there probably is a need for him to play right away. But I think New Orleans is playing, as much as I don't agree with it, New Orleans is playing the long game waiting for next year. I think they took Tyler Shuck in terms of if he hits, they're giving him they're pretty much giving him 1 year. If he plays well in camp, starts next year and plays well, okay, now we can go get other draft needs to put around him. But if we play him and he doesn't play well, we go draft another one next year. So I don't know. I need people to understand it's more of talent / his personality as to why he slid as far as he did. Now, did I expect him to slide that far? Absolutely not. I thought there was no chance in hell that if he slid past New Orleans at 9, that there was no chance he was sliding past Pittsburgh at 21. But obviously he did. Pittsburgh had multiple opportunities to draft him, and they didn't. So I didn't expect to fall, but I also understand why he did fall. So I'll let you take the floor now.
I don't even know what to say after all that. No, so I really do think from all the stuff that I've seen, like on Twitter or X, whatever the hell you want to call it, I really think it was more to do with how he came to the interviews. And I don't mean it as in more, hey, he was cocky. Like we talked about this. You want your quarterbacks cocky. You want your quarterback to have some swagger, come in there and say, hey, yeah, I can lead this team, this group of men who probably most of them are like fathers, grown ass men, right? So you want that from your quarterback. I think he came into these interviews unprepared, and I think that was the deciding factor. And I heard a report he had a private session with Brian Daboll, from the coach from the Giants, and he came in and I think the report said he came in late and very unprepared. So the worst thing you can do in any interview, no matter what you're doing, is come unprepared.
And if you're going to come unprepared, don't show up late.
I'm pretty sure the report said he maybe showed up late. I could have been wrong on that, but regardless, even if you show up on time, if you're unprepared, they're going to sniff that out within the first 10 minutes. Daboll probably asked him 4 or 5 questions, and he was like, well, this guy didn't even want to interview. And so I think that ultimately came to the fact, it has a little bit to do with his ego. He thought, he's like, you're all going to draft me regardless anyway. I'm just going to show up and do these interviews and then leave. So I think that's a big thing. And then,
and the other thing that I heard on top of that is the teams that Dion and Shedeur didn't want, the teams that Dion didn't want Shedeur to go to, and the teams that Shedeur did want to go to, the teams that he interviewed with, he purposely tanked those.
Maybe.
And I'm sorry, you can do that if you want and think that works, but if you don't think that doesn't spread around the league afterwards, you're mistaken.
All these coaches and GMs, they all talk to each other. That shit spreads around like a high school rumor. But I think it may be. If I'm Shedeur, I'm a little pissed I even went to the draft for this, because not only am I got to compete with a bunch of quarterbacks now for the Browns. Now he has a pretty good chance to win the starting job, but he also lost a ton of money because I think his guaranteed contract is, I think it was like $200,000 or something like that for a 5th round pick. His NIL evaluation this year would have been reported like $6.5 million. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, look at Quinn Ewers, who went in the 7th round of the Dolphins. He's only guaranteed like 80,000, something like that, or it may be more than that. But he's only guaranteed that. His NIL offer that he had to enter the transfer portal would have been $8 million.
So yeah, I mean, it makes the draft a little less enticing for these guys, because why not stay in college as long as possible where I can still be, really good and make a lot of money? I don't know why these guys are doing this. I understand the dream is to play in the NFL, but if you have a chance to come back and make a good amount of money and you're not guaranteed it if you go to the draft, then what the hell? Why are you even going? Go back to college and make your money. You're going to make. And if something, then you go pro, and then if something happens, you get hurt or whatever, then you're still set. You have money. So, but Shedeur, I think is going to get a chance. I think this really only ultimately helped him because he's got now a chip on his shoulder. If there's anybody that I think that could take that and use it for his drive, it's him, because that's the type of guy it seems like he is from what we see on social media and stuff. So I'm rooting for the guy. I was kind of upset that he slid that far. I'm sure there was a bunch of fans saying, "Hey, why are we not taking him? He's still there."
I mean, hell, even as a Colts fan, I was
Oh
like,
yeah,
4th round. Why would you not
just taking
like take the flyer?
Richardson gets hurt
Again, it all falls back to if I use realistically a 4th round or later pick on him and he doesn't pan out, he doesn't end up starting.
Then
It's not that bad of a pick still, because realistically, your 4th round and on guys, like especially at the quarterback position, if I take you and you don't pan out or you end up just as a backup, it's not a wasted pick. You don't realistically go into the 4th round looking for your starting quarterback. So I was like, why not? Why not just draft Shedeur and make it an open competition and tell them, listen, AR, Daniel Jones, Shedeur, these are our guys. Whoever comes out swinging the hardest is the one that's going to get the job.
Yeah, I mean, Shedeur's going to have to work his ass off to be the starting job in Cleveland, I think. I mean, he's going to have to beat out a decent amount of quarterbacks. And you have Dylan Gabriel, I know he's not the tallest guy, and that hurts a quarterback, but he's a good quarterback. He can throw the ball. And, I mean, it's all about learning the offense and how you mesh with guys. So,
yeah, so my uncle was telling me, because apparently he was fully expecting the Browns at some point to draft Jalen Milroe, because that's all the talk had been up there in Cleveland was Milroe. And he sent me this. Said, so apparently the Browns brought Dylan Gabriel in for a top 30 visit the very first day, along with Shedeur, Travis Hunter, and Abdul Carter. Said then the day before the Colorado Pro Day, the Browns went to Oregon for a private workout and dinner with Dylan Gabriel, but they kept the information under wraps. Browns also had firsthand exposure to Gabriel at the Senior Bowl. Bubba Ventrone coached the opposing team, while Jacques Cesar, I don't know that's how you say his name, coached Gabriel's team. It seems like the Browns guy all along was Dylan Gabriel. They just kept it under wraps.
So then why draft Shedeur?
Yeah, that I don't understand. So there was also a theory with that, because if you look if you watched after they draft Shedeur, they showed the Browns war room, and there were no clapping, there were no anything. People just kind of sat there with like blank stares on their face. So somebody said, I think ownership had enough, and ownership made the call and said, you draft Shedeur.
Very possible. I could also see them trading him.
Well, and that's the other thing I kept saying. If you don't want him, in terms of, I don't want him in my locker room, don't want to play him, whatever. At this point, as far as he keeps falling, why not draft him and just use him as trade bait?
Yeah. That's what I would have done.
Like, hey, I've got this guy that was a potential 1st-round draft pick quarterback. I still use him in practice, and then just leak out to everybody, hey, he's actually got a great attitude, great working, great work ethic. He's actually killing it in practice. We just don't have a need to play him right now, and have some team potentially offer you a 2nd, 3rd round pick for him.
Yeah, I don't know. Again, we can speculate, for an hour, but I'm rooting for the guy. I think he's gonna work out. I think it's gonna be a couple years, but he's got a chip on his shoulder now.
I think he's gonna play this year.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, be really good. I think it's gonna take a couple years. But
I think
he'll get a chance this year.
If I had to bet the way the Browns depth chart will go week 1, so my guess is it's gonna go Kenny Pickett as a starter week 1, Joe Flacco as a backup, and then I think Shedeur is gonna win out the 3rd on the depth chart.
Gabriel job.
Yep, I think he's going to win the 3rd on the depth chart. And I think you'll see the Browns, just like the Browns do when they start to rotate quarterbacks, try different things out. Joe Flacco will get his time. And then if Joe Flacco doesn't work out, you'll see Shedeur at some point this year, I think. Especially if they're not winning football games towards the end of the year. I could see them just go and just fuck it, throw them out there. Let's see what we got for the last couple weeks of the season.
Yep. All right, well, let's go over the review now. Let's go with your top 5 teams you liked and top 5 teams.
Yeah, so I want to start by two of my guys that I had rated highly for me, and this is just for me. Obviously, my evaluations aren't the same, and again, you can use the whole who am I to evaluate players versus other people. Sure, you're absolutely right, but the way I look at it, 2 guys that I was really high on that went undrafted, and they were actually my top 2 receivers on my board, was Nick Nash and Xavier Restrepo, went undrafted. Now, Xavier Restrepo is going to go to Tennessee to reunite with Cam Ward.
Yeah, I saw that.
Get his shot at the roster. Nick Nash is signed a deal with the Atlanta Falcons, so he'll have a chance as well. But those were 2 of my guys that I was high on that didn't get drafted. So let's start off with my teams that I disliked. The first one on the draft that I did not like, the Cincinnati Bengals.
Is this in any order?
No, not really. The Cincinnati Bengals, you had an opportunity this offseason in the draft specifically to highly improve your defense. You took Shedeur Stewart in the first round, which I thought was a terrible pick. Again, you're going with Shedeur Stewart, you're going with somebody that has upside versus when you're the Bengals and as bad as of a defense that you have right now, you can't be taking a player based off upside. You need somebody that can come in and make a difference for you right now. And that's what they needed, and they didn't get it. And I was never a fan of Shedeur Stewart. I'm never a fan of those guys that late in the year at the Senior Bowl or at the combine that all of a sudden go from nowhere near first round guys to all of a sudden because they have one good outing. Now, they're first round guys. Lock it in. Not a fan of that. You got to show me more. You got to show me throughout a 12-game tape throughout a season than just a one-game pro day, because it could have just been a bad matchup at a Senior Bowl. So they did draft Demetrius Knight Jr., which I did like in the second round. I do like that pick for them. And then Dylan Fairchild in the third round, I do. But the later rounds where you had an opportunity to still fix this defense, they just did not do. It included drafting a running back in the sixth round, which they really didn't need. Wasn't a bad pick, but don't need a running back. But Bengals, I thought, did not have that good of a draft. Next were the Green Bay Packers. I know the Packers were very excited to draft a wide receiver in the first round for the first time in like 20 some odd years. But much like the Bengals, you needed to improve this defense. You needed an edge rusher. You needed to improve the defense, and you chose wide receiver. Now, I get it. The Packers did need a wide receiver, but at the same time, they don't. I never really understood the whole they need a wide receiver. You have Christian Watson, Jalen Reed, Romeo Doubs, Dontavian Wicks. Like, they have a bunch of good receivers. Do they have an alpha in the room? No, but but you fix that by trading for an alpha in a room. They have a room full of good receivers already. I didn't think they needed that. They had to address edge rusher, and they didn't. And they really didn't until the fourth round with Barron Sorrell. Didn't get an edge rusher. They went another wide receiver in the third round, and then an interior offensive lineman, which is just a typical Packers pick in the second round. So I thought they had plenty of time or plenty of needs to address on the defense, and they just refused not to in the draft. Next was the Houston Texans. They traded out of the first round, and this is a team that very, very, very badly needed to find ways to protect C.J. Stroud. I mean, we watched C.J. get absolutely obliterated against Kansas City in the playoff game. And they needed to find offensive linemen. And first pick in the second round, when they traded back, they take a wide receiver, Jaden Higgins. Now, anybody that's been watching my YouTube videos, I am high on Jaden Higgins. But again, when your need is protect C.J. Stroud, what good's it do to draft a wide receiver if C.J. Stroud can't get it to these guys because he's being pummeled? So They drafted one in the second round with Ariante Ursere. Good pick. But then again, your next couple picks after that goes wide receiver, corner, running back, safety, quarterback, defensive lineman, and tight end. So we addressed the offensive line one time in the draft and just didn't do it at all the rest of the draft.
You said they drafted a quarterback?
Yeah.
Who?
Graham Mertz.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and again, okay, I get it. I understand their need for a wide receiver. Diggs left this offseason. Tank Dell, I mean, the verdict's still out if he's going to play football again with as bad of an injury he had. So I get it. You do need wide receivers. But again, what good does it do to draft wide receivers if you don't have an offensive line to protect C.J. Stroud to get to these wide receivers?
Yeah.
So
running for his life again.
So that was the Texans. My next one was the Minnesota Vikings. They needed, to me, with their first couple picks, to address their secondary. Their secondary was bad as is last year, and then they lost Cameron Bynum. Thank you, because he came to Indianapolis. But needed to address the secondary, and they did not do that. They drafted my guy Donovan Jackson out of Ohio State in the first round. Okay, I get it. You know, can never have enough guys up front. But then we proceeded with the next couple round picks to go wide receiver, D-line, linebacker, tight end. So I would think a team that has Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, wide receiver would be the last thing on my mind. And then, again, their front seven was already very good last year. You needed to add to the secondary, and they just did not add anybody to the secondary at all throughout the draft. And then my last one was, shockingly, because this team has drafted so well over the last couple of years, is the Detroit Lions. Lions, when they lost Aiden Hutchinson last year, lost a lot on the defensive side of the football. And they could have used this draft to address that. There were a lot of good pass rushers still available at pick 28. They decided to go D-tackle at pick 28, which, okay, not a bad pick. We could still, get into the trenches, get after the quarterback with a D lineman. But then we went interior offensive lineman, wide receiver, another interior offensive lineman. Then we finally go edge rusher, where we reached hard with Hassanin out of Boise State. And then Dan Jackson and Dominic Levet in the last couple of rounds. We addressed the edge rusher position one time in the draft. And the one time they did, it was a huge reach for who they got, especially when guys like Mike Green and them were falling in the second and third round, which now leads to the teams that I liked. Number one, not number one, not ranked, but just number one from this. The Chicago Bears. I thought their first 3 draft picks pretty much won in the draft. I understand taking Colston Loveland over Tyler Warren was maybe a questionable thing, but Colston Loveland's still a very good player. I like that. Luther Burden falling to them in the second round was absolutely crazy, and that was a steal for Chicago. And then Ozzie Trapilo, offensive tackle from Boston College. And then from there, the Bears did exactly what they should have done, which is draft based off need for the rest of the way. They got themselves a linebacker, another corner, another offensive tackle, and they got themselves a pretty steal at running back in the 7th round. Pretty good steal. So the Bears, I thought, had a phenomenal draft. The next one, the Browns. Listen, I know it was kind of questionable for the Browns to trade back from number 2 when they have Travis Hunter sitting there waiting for them. And it is the typical Browns thing to do, to trade back when you have a guy like Travis Hunter sitting there waiting for you. But they were able to trade back. They still got a very good player in Mason Graham. And not only that, they were able to trade back, get Mason Graham, and have a first-round pick for next year, which is going to be a very good quarterback class next year from the early goings of what it looks like. Then they went Carson Sweshinger at linebacker, who I really like. Quinshon Judkins at the running back position that I really like. Harold Fannin, I was a huge fan of, no pun intended there, in the 3rd round. And then obviously to land who I had as my number 2 quarterback on my board, Shedeur Sanders in the 5th round. Regardless of, drafting Dylan Gabriel in the 3rd round or whatever, that's very good value for a pick. So I went with the Cleveland Browns. And the next one, another team in their division, and Doug will like to hear this because sometimes I don't know if he's a fan of this team or the Colts, but the Baltimore Ravens. And in typical fashion, the Ravens usually draft very, very well. Malachi Starks in the 1st round. To be able to have a safety duo next year of Malachi Starks and Kyle Hamilton is going to be a scary thought for teams throwing against the Baltimore Ravens. Mike Green was if I remember correctly, number 2 rated edge rusher on my board. They snagged him in the 2nd round. Emory Jones at offensive tackle. I like this because he wasn't high on my board. But when I'm looking at offensive tackles, my offensive tackle needs to be able to fit who my quarterback is as well. Emory Jones, when he was at his best last year, was blocking for Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels, very similar. Now, I'm not saying Jaden Daniels is Lamar Jackson, whatever, but similar style quarterback. He knows how to defend the pocket for those styles of quarterback. So I really like that pick. And then they just proceeded to make, and there's a lot of picks here, so I'm not going to read them all off, and a bunch of very good, valuable picks from the rest of the way, as the Ravens usually do. Next, I really liked what the Las Vegas Raiders did, getting Ashton Jeanty in round 1. I know you asked me this weekend what I felt about him going to the Raiders. Pete Carroll has been at his best when he's had a running game that he can run around. Reggie Bush, Lindell White when he was at USC, Marshawn Lynch when he was in Seattle. So getting Ashton Jeanty, he's got to have the workhorse do it all back for his offense to go. So I really like that. I really like the pick of Jack Besh in the 2nd round. Darian Porter in the 3rd round was a steal. Really like the additions of Caleb Rogers and Charles Grant in the 3rd round on the offensive line. Dante Thornton from Tennessee I thought was a very good pick in the later rounds. I just thought the Raiders all around just – the only questionable thing, they drafted 2 quarterbacks in the 6th round. Why, I don't know. But other than that, I really liked what they did. And then finally, the New England Patriots were my last one. I mean, they went into this offseason knowing what they had to do to help Drake May out, and they did just that. Got him offensive line help with Will Campbell. Travion Henderson in the 2nd round at the running back position. Kyle Williams, the wide receiver from Washington State, in the 3rd round. Got him an interior offensive line help with Jared Wilson, who I had as my best interior offensive lineman in the draft. Then proceeded a steal in the 5th round with Braden Swinson, the edge rusher out of LSU. They addressed what they needed to address. They knew they have to protect Drake May. Their offensive line was abysmal. They had to protect Drake May, and we got to get him some weapons. And that's exactly what they did. And I think a 1-2 punch of Ramondre Stevenson and then Travion Henderson is going to be a really good running back group in New England. And I think just based off what they've done in this class, in this draft class, and then in free agency, I would not be shocked to see the Patriots scare some teams and making the playoffs next year.
Yeah, on top of having now Vrabel.
Yeah, and then, you add in Mike Vrabel. So those were my teams. Doug, I don't know. I know you watched some of the draft. I don't know if you want to add in anything that you liked.
No, the amount of in-depthness, using that as an adjective, that you do. Is that an adjective? I don't know. Grammar. Somebody correct me. For this, no way in hell I'm competing with. So great job, buddy.
Yeah,
great job. Yeah,
we've already started for 2026 too. Once 2025 ends, we go right into 2026 draft. We're ready.
Oh, I'm sure you got to wait too early top picks and everything.
Yeah. If I was, I'll just give a look. My betting pick. If I had to bet right now, the number one, and it never works out like this. Whoever you have as the number one pick now is never the number one pick. Yeah, I'm sure. Then, unless you have a generational, prospect. But my money's on Garrett Nussmeier out of LSU next year. I think he's my pick to win the Heisman next year, and I think he's my pick to go number one overall in the draft.
Yeah, he's a great quarterback. I think he's primed for a great season next year for sure.
The Saints are the team to watch for him because his dad is the offensive coordinator of the New Orleans Saints.
I didn't know that. Man, Tyler Shuck going to be thrown to the curb. So sad.
Let's just hope that Tyler Shuck can throw to Chris Olave to where Chris Olave doesn't get hurt. Because the last couple of years that Chris Olave has got hurt is because Derek Carr can't throw the ball to him properly, and he puts him in positions to get hurt.
I think it's time to move on from.
I think Derek Carr just needs to retire.
Hey, maybe he's close. He's coming off an injury, and we'll see. Yeah, so. I think it's the type of draft this was on with all the Shedeur stuff. I think it makes you look forward a little more to the next season. Because everybody was like, "Oh, who's going to start for the Browns?" Everybody's going to be looking at the Browns now because of Shedeur. Say what you want about him playing quarterback. The dude brings publicity to your team. Some teams want that, some teams they don't. So probably another reason why some of these teams didn't draft him. But yeah, overall, it was a good draft.
Overall, like him or hate him, Shedeur Sanders is a polarizing figure.
He is.
And
he is.
Because he's playing for the Browns, it's more than likely going to go one of two ways for him. Either it's just going to go bad, like it usually does for the Browns, or it's going to go well enough, and the Browns are just going to trade him, just like they did Baker.
And Baker's had a solid career.
The Browns have had to live with the fact that they were just willing to let Baker. They at one point before they actually traded him, they were willing to let Baker walk. A number one overall pick walk. And now they have to live with massage parlor Deshaun Watson until that contract runs out. Because if you think, I'm sorry, and I know people are going to go from earlier when we were talking about the Browns quarterback room, when I said who's going to be one of the, if you think Deshaun Watson is going to see that field next year, you are sadly mistaken.
No chance in hell he's playing football next year.
And if he is, it's the Browns thing to do.
Well, maybe.
But real quick, going back to that. I saw a tweet about when it was about the whole Shedeur's falling and everything. And somebody said, Baker Mayfield was one of the most arrogant college football players ever, but that didn't stop him from going first round. And he wasn't even as good as Shedeur Sanders. So what's the difference? Well, one comes from a wealthy family in Texas, and he's white. The other comes from a wealthy family as well, but he's not white, and his dad is Deion Sanders. First of all, and I saw the other people trying to compare it to Johnny Manziel as well. Listen, both of them quarterbacks in college were 100 times the quarterback Shedeur Sanders was.
Yeah, not even a question.
Okay, there were people, sure, yeah, Johnny Manziel was an alcoholic, and we still drafted him in round one, sure. But because we saw the highlights on tape and go, if we can just hone him in, he could be this. This is what he could be. And yeah, why would you not take that shot? If you have all the extras, and then I'll wrap up the Shedeur and the draft stuff with this. If you have all the extras that Shedeur Sanders did with his dad, his interviews and everything, your talent has to be so far up here that teams don't care about what else brings to it. Sure, they're going to be still worried about it. But if your talent's up here and your, what you do off the field, whatever is right here, that gap is big enough for a team to still take a chance on you because of your talent level. You can't be what you do off the field and all that interview wise and everything. Your talent can't be right here with it. Your talent has to be more in order for a team to take a chance. And that's why Shedeur fell.
Well said. Well said. All right. Well, I think that pretty much wraps up the NFL draft review and We bitched enough about Shedeur Sanders and all that stuff. So thanks for listening. Like, comment, subscribe, click that notification bell. We'll see you guys in the next one.
Peace.
Peace.